Hey there, welcome to the NFL DFS Builds, the Monday Night Football Showdown edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to go over this slate between the Buccaneers and the Chiefs. It's probably not going to be a very fun game because the Chiefs are 9-point home favorites and the Buccaneers are reeling at the moment. They have tons of injuries. Obviously, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin being the most noteworthy for their offense. Not the best time to have your two best wide receivers be missing when you're facing such a good defense in Kansas City. So Chiefs are undefeated. Obviously, they're going to do everything they can to keep that going. It just doesn't look for a good spot to back the Bucs at all. So I think you could do that right away and get different from the field. Just to look at the captain ownership to see what I'm talking about. Patrick Mahomes runs away as the leading favorite with 24% ownership in the captain slot. Right behind him is Travis Kelce, 11% away, so it's a significant gap. So Mahomes is the chalk. I have no problem with rostering Mahomes in the captain slot. Definitely love him in the flex. I think I would just automatically, because it's the way I roll, I think I would go underweight a little bit. I think obviously, based off the ownership we're seeing, you can do that with Kelce or Kareem Hunt at 13, 11%. And I mean, you can get away with that. I think you could probably even get away with Mahomes there. You just got to make sure if you do eat that chalk at that magnitude that you are getting considerably different and or leaving a major money on off your lineup. So I just think the best way and fastest way to do that is to go find a captain worth using that is not garnering much ownership that we feel can hit his projection or more. And then we can slide those other popular plays over to the flex and or fade the ones that we don't feel are going to hit. So up top, Mahomes, love him. The only issue is his ownership. Next up, Travis Kelce. Buccaneers are not good against the pass, and they're certainly not any better against tight ends. Let me check that out. Actually, just to be specific, they are let's see, sixth worst against tight ends on the year. So yeah, it looks good for Kelce. Obviously, his role is pretty good in general, just because the Chiefs have had injuries. He had 12 targets last week, 10 catches, and a touchdown. He has had 9+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. In 3 of his last 4 games, and in 3 of those 4 games, he had 15+ fantasy points. I do think the arrival of DeAndre Hopkins could create an issue, but the matchup in general is awesome, so I have no issue at all with sliding Kelce over to the flex. And because of the ownership gap in captain, I think Kelce is a fine captain play as well. Kareem Hunt looks pretty good too. I think he would definitely rank third as far as guys I want to use, just because the Buccaneers up front are not the softest run defense necessarily. The way to get after the Buccaneers would be run defense is not really on the ground so much, because they are like top 10 against the run in terms of rushing yards, and they've only given up 4 rushing scores on the year. The way to get to them is actually through the passing game, through the running backs. They're giving up the 4th most receiving yards to running backs, and they've given up 50 catches, which ranks 4th as well. So, Hunt is definitely out there quite a bit, so he can definitely rack up some catches. And we know he can fall into the end zone. He hasn't exactly been the most efficient guy, but he has had a huge role. Let's see. He's been looking at 20+ carries in each of his last 3 games. All 4 games he's been back with the Chiefs, he's had at least 16 total touches, and he's had at least 1 touchdown in 3 straight games. So he looks like a very, very safe play. I just will warn you that the Buccaneers' run defense up front is not as welcoming as their overall production given up to running backs suggests. Kareem Hunt is still a good play, and at 11% ownership in the captain, he is a fine pivot off of Kelce and a very nice leverage play on Mahomes. But again, these guys are still carrying ownership, so they are not the guys I am looking to right away to get different in lineups and hopefully work my way up the standings. Next up is Baker Mayfield at 10% ownership. He's the last guy in double digits for the ownership in the captain slot. I'm not surprised that he's carrying ownership because he's a quarterback and quarterbacks carry ownership, but I guess I'm a little surprised it's at 10% just because the Buccaneers are not projected to do very well in this game. That said, Baker has been a bit of a machine. He's had 20+ fantasy points in each of his last 5 games, and he's had 30+ fantasy points in 3 of those games. So even with his back against the wall, even with turnovers, 2+ turnovers in each of his last 3 games, and even without his top 2 guys, he's still been getting it done. I don't really think he's going to do that on the road against this good Chiefs defense, but He is the 4th highest owned captain, so you can gain leverage right away by playing Baker in there if you think he's going to. I think another way you can do it is slide him into flex because he's not going to be quite as owned as some of these other flex guys, and then go get one of his punts and put him in captain, and then kind of work out the rest of the lineup however you see fit. My best guess would be you could stack Baker with one of his other guys and then go get Mahomes and or Kelsey and Kareem Hunt. So more on that as we get down to the dives, but I don't have a problem with going against the grain and going Buccaneers. I just don't know for sure if I would slide in Baker at that ownership if I'm going to take that angle. I think one of the best ways to do that would be Rachaad White, just because we know Rachaad White is a pass catching back. The Chiefs are not giving out production to running backs in any regard. So it just is what it is. You have to play the slate. I mean, if you want to go 5-1, 5 Chiefs, 1 Buck, you can do that. I just don't know if it's going to be necessarily the anti-chalk strategy on this showdown slate. But Rachaad White's only coming at 6% ownership. His projection is not amazing due to the matchup, but he had 29 fantasy points 2 games ago. And last game he came back from injury and had 16 fantasy points. In both these last 2 games, he had 5+ catches on 6+ targets, and he also found his way into the end zone 3 times as a receiver. So because they're probably going to be trailing, I think Rachaad White is a really solid play. You can play him in the flex and a 6% ownership and captain. I like him a good amount. I don't have a problem with it. The only issue, obviously, would be that the Chiefs are not a fun draw, and also the other guys in Tampa Bay's backfield, Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving, could factor into it. Worth only Bucky Irving's got a toe issue, and he is questionable, so that could further the interest in Rachaad White. But even more so than White, I really like the Chiefs guys that are not going to be owned. Obviously, Mahomes, Kelsey, Hunt are carrying the ownership. I like the strategy of just going and targeting either Nuke, DeAndre Hopkins, or Xavier Worthy, who are coming in at the same ownership as White, but just feel like better plays with a higher ceiling. The Buccaneers on the year have been very bad against the pass. They're bottom 5 against wide receivers, and they are bottom 2. They are 31st against fantasy quarterbacks on the year. This feels like a big Mahomes game, and I think obviously the fastest way or the safest way to get that exposure is Mahomes and Kelsey. But I think we can take our shots here on guys like Xavier Worthy and DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins would be a volume / touchdown dependent play. In his first game with the team, he did not crush. He had 2 catches on 3 targets for 29 yards. So perhaps that plays into his ownership being lowered a bit. Maybe he gets it going in his second week on the job. And there's obviously Xavier Worthy, who's just kind of hit or miss. He's not a high volume guy, but he's had 6+ targets in each of the last 3 games. He scored last week, and he's at 11+ fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. So this is matchup based mostly, but this guy is explosive. Even if you want to look at him as a gadget player, he can get it done. So both him and Nuke look really interesting in the captain. My preference is Worthy because he projects better and comes in at slightly less ownership. And his price is also higher than Nuke. So just in general, he's going to be a little bit overlooked in the captain slot. And right now he's coming in as the 7th highest owned captain play. So he's actually coming in as my favorite captain play of the entire slate. Just because for GPPs, he has a monster ceiling and he's currently being overlooked. Next up would be Cade Otton, who's dropping down here at 5% ownership in the captain. The Chiefs, their one weakness on the year has been tight ends. The Chiefs are second worst against tight ends on the year, giving up 49 catches for 566 yards, only 2 touchdowns allowed. But Cade Otton scored twice last week and has been extremely involved ever since Mike Evans left, 21 fantasy points or more in each of the last 2 games. So he's playing that red zone role for the Bucs, and he's also being a bit of a possession receiver because he's kind of the only guy Baker Mayfield can trust. So I really like Otton. If you want to target a Buccaneer in the captain slot, my first one that I'd be looking at is going to be Otton, just because I feel like he's the safest and he offers the most upside. Now, if you don't want to play Otton, you don't want to play Baker, but you want to get the Buccaneers exposure, I think you then start looking at Jalen McMillan. He was limited in practice and he's questionable for the slate with a hammy. So obviously, if he's in, I still think he's viable in the captain. But if he is out, we can look at Sterling Shepard, who, by the way, is also questionable with a hamstring injury. So look at that. And there's Trey Palmer. But the guy I might be looking at the most because he's so cheap would be Raheem Jarrett. He only played like 27% of snaps last game, but he had 3 targets, 3 catches, 58 yards. So we saw a little bit of explosive ability there. And just like he's going to be super cheap and not owned in the captain whatsoever. But all those guys are in play. You just got to look at who actually playing, who's suiting up, and who's going to be out there. But McMillan, Palmer, Shepard, Jarrett, all those guys are viable and look really, really interesting as captain punts to let you go pay for whoever you want in the flex. So right now I did a kind of a mock build. Raheem Jarrett in the captain slot, completely unknown. Pairing with Baker and Otten. And then you have Mahomes, Hunt, and Kelsey. The problem with that lineup structure is it's just 3 versus 3, and you're not getting enough leverage against the field, I think. So you're going to have to make some kind of switch. So you're not just eating a ton of chalk. You're taking on a little bit more risk and give yourself, a real chance to shoot up the standings. Still getting it over cold here. So those are probably the best ways to do it on this slate. You can always take these home run shots on guys that are like super risky, whether it be Noah Gray, Justin Watson, P. Ryan. I think of all those punt guys, Raheem Jarrett would probably be my favorite. And that's why I led with him. Sean Tucker, Carson Steele, Mecole Hardman. I just don't feel Carson Steele. I don't feel great about any of those guys. They're all in play. They're viable. You can throw them in the flex. You can captain them. But if I'm going to do a punt, it's going to be Raheem Jarrett as things stand. And then the last two guys I'll mention, not two guys, but two positions will be the kickers and the defenses. Obviously, you got to lean Chiefs here. If you want to go GPP mode, you can play the Buccaneers, fire them up. They're desperate. They're on the road. They're big underdogs. And then there's, maybe they sack Mahomes 5 times to get a pick 6 or something crazy, maybe a special teams touchdown. You never know. Point is, Buccaneers defense is not going to be owned, so you could fire up the Buccaneers defense. I wouldn't suggest captaining them, but you could play them in the flex at no ownership. That said, logically speaking, this is a way better spot for the Chiefs. So I would definitely go with them if I was going to play defense. But the fact that they're coming at 20% ownership in the flex means that that's not something nobody's thinking about. So I think the main thing I would do is just play for this to be an unexpected shootout. It's not projected that way at all. The Buccaneers are not even projected to score 20 points. So let's just pretend it's going to be. And let's get a lot of exposure to both offenses and kind of fade the defenses. I still think we can entertain the idea of rostering the kickers, even if we want to do that. Harrison Butker at 5.2K in the flex is fine. Chase McLaughlin at 4.8K feels even better just because the Buccaneers, it feels like they're going to probably move the ball and their drives will stall out and he'll probably be a little bit more active. But both are fine. You can pair them. You can play them individually. Don't have to play them at all, but that's certainly one way to look at it. As far as other flex punts, before we wrap it up, like I said, Raheem Jarrett is probably my favorite one. Ideally, one of those questionable Buccaneers guys ends up sitting out, and then Raheem Jarrett would look even better. Obviously, there's a chance that there being, solidified news could spike his ownership, but we'll have to refresh leading into lineup lock and see, where everything sits. But yeah, quick recap. This is a spot where I am probably going to just embrace the fact that the Chiefs are 9-point home favorites and they're going to win this game. But I'm going to play it as if the Buccaneers are going to keep it closer than expected and that this game is going to be more offensive driven than, a one-sided dominant showdown where the Chiefs their defense, is a must play or something like that. So 2 ways we can do that. We can eat a little bit of the chalk. You can eat the chalk in the captains if you want. You just got to find a way to get different beyond that. My favorite strategy is to just get different at captain right away. And the best way that I want to do that on this slate is going to be with Xavier Worthy in the captain. He is the 7th owned captain, only 6%. I can still pair him with a chalky Mahomes. I can still go get a chalky Kelsey and or Hunt. And then I can also still, fire up Mayfield or whoever else I want to, really, and go from there. Obviously, one of those guys will have to be faded. It's just a financial decision. But Worthy just feels like one of the better ways to do it. And right after Worthy, it's going to be Nuke. And then on the other side, if I want to go get Buccaneers and stack that way, I still think I'd be Chiefs heavy. I don't really want to do a 5-1 or 4-2 Buck stack, but I do like the idea of getting Raheem Jarrett in the captain And then pairing him with Baker, and then probably going 4-2 Chiefs on the other side. Fading Cade Otton feels a little bit scary just because I feel like the matchup is good and his role is really strong. But going 3 versus 3, it's just you're leaving too much leverage opportunity on the table there, and I don't think that's enough to get you where you want to go. All right, that is going to do it for me. Hopefully this helps you out. Give this video a like if so. And even if not, hopefully giving out free advice is something you like to see, and then you can like the video, and I'll keep on doing it. And if you do like it, you can also subscribe to our channel to get alerted to future videos just like this. We have an NBA video at the end of this video. We try to push this out every day, and NFL videos every single slate we can. All right, thanks for watching, and good luck.